Welcome to the recap show on the Baseball Awakening podcast with Geoff Rottmayer. Today we will discuss the lessons learned and the action items from yesterday's interview.
Hey guys, Geoff Rottmayer here with the Baseball Awakening recap show, where I share with you the biggest takeaways I got from my conversation with Dale Scott and how I plan to implement what I've learned with my players at my academy in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in this case, Dale Scott's an umpire, so it's more of a suggestion into what one would do if baseball is not so kind to him. So anyways, again, as I always say, we want to hear from you because different things mean different things to different people. So it'll be interesting to see how you guys interpreted something that Dale said or something that I'm going to say today. And I'm going to make a show where I read these emails because we can all learn something from it. So my email is going to be Geoff, Geoff, at baseballawakening.com. So send me your thoughts, your comments, and your feedback. You know, I left my conversation with Dale Scott, a retired MLB umpire, wishing I would have tried to be an umpire when my playing days ended at 22, 23, 24 years old. And it's amazing to me how the similarity between being a professional umpire and being an athlete. You know, I never really thought of what all went into being an umpire or what the potential mindset would be of, you know, making a call or making the play. You know, so but anyways, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I went through this conversation. The first thing I asked him was to explain what umpire school was like. You know, and what was interesting was he said that they're scouting you from the moment you get there. They're seeing how you interact, how you carry yourself. All that stuff that we sit here and we tell kids to be aware of, that the college coaches and the professional scouts are taking notice in you. Now, they do the same thing in umpire school for the guys that are going to umpire school and the guys that they want to potentially bring on as umpires. So I think it's interesting to me. You know, I hadn't really ever thought, again, I hadn't ever really thought of what all would be involved in being an umpire. So this was an awesome conversation in which I learned quite a bit. You know, so from there, you know, it sounded like the school part of the umpiring school was pretty intense, but it also sounded like it was a lot of fun. You know, so learning and understanding the rules is obviously a big part of it. I think what's interesting is I love that they pick apart the rule. They go all the way down to the origin and understanding why that rule was put into place. That would have been something pretty cool to kind of learn and understand, you know, why some of the rules were put in place the way that they are. You know, and then from there, Dale talks about, you know, after they kind of spent some time in the classroom learning the rules and stuff, he talked about then they go out into the field and into the cages. And what's interesting is just like hitters and pitchers and fielders and base runners, you know, there are things that you have to do. There are techniques that you have, there are fundamentals that you have to do for you to be the best umpire that you can be. And then they went into the cages and they were doing work, and it was really about calling pitches. And they would set up the pitching machine and they would tell them left-handed hitter or right-handed hitter. And they would have to work on their feet work. They would have to work on their stance. They would have to work on their head height. And then they would learn to track the ball with their eyes, not their head. You know, we tell that to hitters all the time. Track the ball with your eyes, not your head. So it's very interesting, that similarity there, you know. And even catchers, we're telling catchers, you catch the ball with your eyes, not your head. So really cool stuff, you know. And then he talked about, you know, after they do some work there, they go on the field and they're working on, you know, situational plays. So just like a fielder, you know, they have to understand the situation. They have to understand what potential calls might be coming up, what the play might be, and then think about the rules that had, you know, just like an infield fly rule or something like that, or a forced play. You know, they have to think about all those things. They have to be a couple steps ahead, just like a fielder should be, in understanding what they're going to do. So it's really cool stuff, you know. And then he talked about, you know, the whole idea of it really did learning how to put yourself in the best position, the best distance, the best angle, you know, to make calls with great timing. I thought was very interesting. So, he talked about how, as an umpire, you're going to be physically and mentally exhausted, just like the athlete, just like the hitter would, just like the pitcher would. The umpires are physically and mentally exhausted at the end of the game. So that's really cool, and again, I keep saying that, but I had never really thought that deep into, what an umpire would do during a game and the call that they would have to make and the mindset they would have to be in. So it's a lot of fun to learn. So then I went on to ask Dale what it was like when he first started his professional career. And he went on to explain what most players would explain before they would go and before a big game. He said a lot of time before a big game or a big series, you build up this worry and these butterflies. And then once the game starts, you're just doing what you've been trained to do. It's interesting, because umpires, they're human. They have that human element to them, and they have the same emotional response as players do. So, and it's all the build-up that you do mentally, and then you go out to the game and you're just doing what you've always done. So it was interesting to hear that from an umpire's perspective, which is expected, but it was interesting to hear that from his perspective of, being worried and then having those butterflies before the game started, and then just letting loose and getting to work. Because he went on and he talked about how when you get your first assignment in pro ball, everyone at that level is trying to figure it out. The players are in a new environment, umpires are in a new environment. There are players who don't speak English. There are players who can't control the baseball. Guys are throwing harder than what Dale was used to. And that brought me up a question. I asked him, I said, how tough is it to call a game when a pitcher at a lower level is throwing extremely hard with movement, but he doesn't have a whole lot of control? And I love his answer because he said, as an umpire, just like a hitter or a pitcher would, you got to play the game one pitch at a time. You got to be in the present moment. The moment you start guessing or overthinking, you're losing your focus on the game. And the moment you start overthinking, you're going to miss that next call or that next play. Just like we tell hitters and fielders and pitchers, play the game one pitch at a time and stay in the present moment. The other thing that he said that was, umpire, his job as an umpire is not to play the cat and mouse game with the pitcher, like the pitcher and hitter does. He's not trying to anticipate what the pitcher will throw. Because the moment he says, hey, I think he's going to throw an off speed here, and he comes with a fastball, he's going to miss it. So it's all about just kind of trusting the eyes and keeping the head still to make a call. Kind of like we tell hitters, we tell them to trust their eyes and let their body respond just like they did during training. So the umpires, they're trusting their eyes to make the call. Zero guessing, zero predicting, and what they will throw because they're not trying to hit the ball. So I thought that was a cool thing that he said there. And he goes on and we're talking about timing. In baseball, and we're talking about timing and pitching. We're talking about timing and hitting. Timing is everything in the game, and same with umpiring. He goes, when you see the game at a level where guys are throwing the ball so hard with great movement, or you got a guy in a field that's super fast and he's gonna make bang plays. He's gonna make plays be very, very close. That he talked about. You gotta slow the game down. Just like we tell hitters and pitchers, you gotta slow the game down. You gotta take that extra half a second to make sure you get the call right. So make sure that the ball hits the catcher's glove, and then you got that half a second to make a call. Make sure that the bang play, make sure you take a half a second to make that extra call. So the timing of it is important. You said, some guys will make the call too quick. And when you make a call too quick, then you're running into an issue of making a bad call. And then now you're overguessing yourself and you get yourself in a bad position. So the timing of it, I thought, was pretty interesting stuff that he talked about. How important it is along with, with that, he talked about the angles and the distance, and I asked him to share with him, because he talked about that several times throughout the conversation. So I asked him if he could share what he meant about angles and distance. And he talked about, the most important thing for an umpire is really the angle, because you're not always going to be close to the play. But if you got the right angle, then you got a pretty good chance of getting the call right. So getting the right angle was more important than distance. Now, obviously, if you have good distance and angle, that's better. But you got to have great angles as an umpire. The other thing that he talked about that I thought was interesting was there's actually a protocol, I guess that you can call it, to when they could throw someone out and when they can't, which I thought was interesting. It would be interesting to hear a little bit more about that and learn more about that. But, being able to control yourself, being composed during that time is a skill that they look for. Being able to handle someone yelling at your face or spitting in your face is a skill. It's a skill that they look for. So I think that was an interesting approach when hearing about that. And like I said, the whole conversation was fascinating me. And like I said, if I would have listened to this conversation at 22, 23, 24 years old, it's something I would have probably considered, really trying out, see if I can make it into an umpire and see the game from a different side of things, but still having the same, kind of mindset and view on the game. So, if you guys didn't listen to the conversation, I would listen to it, because he talked about, he shared some great stories about when he was, he got to be in an all-star game, and he got to be in the World Series, and that, how fun it is, because he talked about, you got to think about it. There's 3 teams on the field. There's the home team, the away team, and the umpire. And so you got to think of it as a team, and then so they get the opportunity to go to World Series. They get the opportunity to go to the All-Star game. And of course, you got to be one of the best of the best, to be able to get those opportunities. So it was cool to hear those type of stories. So, here's my biggest takeaway, and again, this is more of a kind of a recommendation. If the game can be cruel, man. The game's going to tell you when it's done with you, and if you still want to stay in the game, my recommendation, shoot, man, try the umpire route. It seems to be kind of fun, you're bonding with guys, you have a team, and you get to be around the game, be around great athletes, and you get to be a professional in your own right, so I don't know. I think it'd be cool to could have checked it out. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. I hope this conversation was awesome in terms of seeing what it's like to be an umpire, and maybe something that you might want to consider if the game does not work out for you. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. The game's cruel. The game's it's going to tell you. Very few people get to leave the game on their own. No, the game's going to tell you, and there's other options. There's strength conditioning, there's umpire, there's a lot of routes in the game. But the umpiring route, knowing what I know now, seemed like a very fun route and something that I wish I would have tried out. So again, try that out. And again, thank you for tuning in to this show, the Baseball Awakening podcast.